Good evening,
Blog
everyone.
Talk Radio.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. You're listening to Abuse Freedom Live with Josie and Jane. We are here today to introduce someone that we've been looking forward to for a long time. And we've finally gotten someone that's brave enough and has come forward to share her story with all of you. But first, hello, Josie.
Hey, Jane. It's been a pleasure. It's been a while, and I'm hoping that the listening audience is very appreciative of tonight's show. You know, we've always promised to come back when something important has come our way, and that time is now.
Yes. This is probably the most important show we've done.
It certainly is, and I'm hoping that we've reached the masses. I know a lot of people out there were very interested, and they're very happy to see that we're coming back and doing these types of shows again. And so without any more further delay, I'll let you introduce our guest, and let me bring her on board. Give me 1 second here.
Okay.
Okay, Jane.
Hi, April. Welcome to Abuse Freedom Live.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I've been anxious and excited about this show tonight. Excited because you have the information that so many parents out there that have gone through hell have been trying to figure out just what goes on behind the closed doors of CPS. And with this, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you to introduce yourself with what you want to, and to start talking about some of the issues.
Okay. Yeah, Jane, I worked for Child Protective Services in the 90s, and I was actually support staff, not a caseworker. But I had access to a lot of information and a lot of things that were going on over the years that I was there. And the agency itself has, I kind of call it an interesting monster. At the time I was there, it just felt like it was kind of all-consuming. It was the largest agency, state agency in that state, and it took pride in that. And I always found that interesting because, you would think that it was an agency that wished it didn't have any business, but in reality, it created its business. I was actually kind of politely forewarned within probably the first couple of months that I worked there by another coworker that you didn't go against the agency, you didn't speak out against it, and those that did disappeared. And she went on to elaborate. She stated that personally, yes, that they disappeared, was her words. And then she said that one caseworker got fired and was unable to get a job, any other state job within that state. So not just within the agency, but any kind of state agency at all. The other caseworker she referred to, she said, and she just disappeared. And left that for me to fill in the blank. Okay.
Mhm.
And this wasn't, pin me in the corner and, ream it down my throat. It was just in passing in conversation and just taking me under her wing and actually her and I being really good friends. I don't know if that was standard procedure or if she really liked me and wanted to give me a heads up right in the beginning of how things operated. When there was a child death, of a foster child, no one spoke of that in the office. You know, business was as usual, and I always found it rather odd how they would take children from parents that did use drugs and then drug the children in foster care, and some to the degree of death. And I know that there was a lot that we wanted to cover tonight, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of my background and my beginnings there with the agency. I did have more access than most to the computer system and to a lot of different jobs that go on. You have to understand, within this agency, the support staff was given a very small part of the puzzle, so to speak. So their jobs usually were very specific, and you know, they only seen one part of it, like one person doing payroll, you know, one person dealing with the money that comes in with children for when they take children into custody, if they have any kind of money that is attached to them, you know, Social Security, trusts, you know, anything, any way there's money for that children, that goes to the state. When the child is out of the custody of the state, whatever money is left over is supposed to go back with that child. That doesn't happen. Somehow the state figures out how to use up their money, okay? So you have one person that deals with just that aspect. You know, you have the referrals that come in and the process those go through. Well, there's a lot of different steps that goes through. So you just have people that have just a very small part of that puzzle. Well, my position was unique in that I had access to most all of those positions, okay, so I could see the big picture. And now I didn't work really directly on any cases with caseworkers, so I didn't know, you know, how they come to their conclusion on how to handle situations. But there was a lot of extremes, and I couldn't figure this out for a long time on why they were leaving some children in homes and why they were so determined on removing children. And the pattern I was seeing was that if a child was not placeable, they used this word placeable, which meant if they were not adoptable, then they would do whatever they could to leave those children in that home because they didn't want them. If a child was adoptable, then they really wanted those children because once the state adopted out those children, they got a set amount of federal funds.
What did they deem unadoptable, April?
Say that again?
What did they deem unadoptable?
Well, children that people wouldn't want to adopt. So if they were like extremely, yes, usually really sexually abused. If these kids could not be sold out there on the market, you know, they didn't want them. And since they dealt with children on, you know, this daily basis, they knew what those criteria was. That's another thing, too. One of my positions I did for a while was actually setting up, coordinating where children would go on to, you know, like the news or, you know, like a little ad. It was just a short little blip, but I would have to coordinate with the caseworker, with the agency. And it was usually went through a different agency that the child was actually through because they didn't want parents to see their children being advertised. So,
parents,
you know, they would
see their children being advertised. Can you blame them? I mean, you know.
No.
Hello.
Most certainly not. Now, there was some that had relinquished their parental rights willingly. That was very rare. You know, and a lot of times they would get them to do that with false promises. So they'd say, well, you know, your children will go to your parents or to your aunt or whomever. And so they would get parents to relinquish their parental rights, and then the agency just does with the children what they want. They're not bound by any law that I could find, because there was judges that would tell them specifically what to do pertaining to children, and the agency, you know, and I'm going to say, probably assuming that this is spearheaded by the caseworker, you know, the caseworkers would go ahead and do whatever they wanted, and there was no accountability. So an example, I knew of a young girl, I think she was 14, maybe 15, when she had a baby. She did not have a drug problem. She did not have an alcohol problem. So she was not eligible for any local services. Well, she was homeless and went to a local counseling center within the city. They called Child Protective Services. They came and took that baby from her. It was about 2 months old, I think. She was a nursing mom. She was very focused around this little baby. And the caseworker showed up with police in hand and stole that baby from her and left a 14-year-old girl on the streets that took her baby. The judge ordered that caseworker to put the mother into the foster home with her baby so they could be together, and that never happened, and that baby was adopted out. And there was no repercussions for going against what the judge said. Now, you have to also understand is that the courts, family courts, are not legal courts, okay? No one is sworn in, or at least in the state I know of. When you go to court before a juvenile court for your children, there is no one sworn in, so no one has to tell the truth. And no one has to follow what is being said because it's not a legal binding court.
Just 1 second. Josie, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. I'm going to let you ask her a question about what she's talking about. You knowing more about that?
Yeah, my question would be, do you believe it would be the same for the majority of states where these judges do not swear in, and the workers, you know, if you could tell us a little bit about their training and where do they get their information from? You know, like I noticed that a lot of workers are only, like maybe they have an associate's degree. They don't have any expertise. So how do they know if a child is being abused or abandoned or neglected if they don't have the capabilities or the experience to be able to make such a determination? And then I have another question for you, which would be...
Let me answer
let's
that
go with
one
those
first.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Now, from all I have to go on is my experience, of course. Mm-hmm. I have not been in juvenile court in another state, so I cannot answer that. But it's very simple to go in and watch what is happening. So if judges aren't sworn in, if witnesses aren't sworn in, caseworkers are not sworn in, okay, that's what happens in the state that I'm familiar with. They don't have any of that going on. Okay, and as far as their training, I really don't know what training is required, except I do know when I went through my orientation, when I got the job, it was like a 3-day, 5-day, it's been so many years now, I can't remember, but went through this training, and it was all support staff and caseworkers orientation, okay? what I was hearing over and over again in that was these new caseworkers were asking, but where's our guidelines? What are the rules? And the answers were, you use your own judgment. Okay? You have to decide in case-by-case situation what you basically want to do in that situation. Okay? So here these caseworkers, over and over again, we're going, but, this, it doesn't make sense. And it does not make sense. It did not make sense to them. It didn't make sense to me. But here you have these people going in probably really wanting to do what's right. They don't understand the monster they're going to work for. So it's wide open when they come in. And as far as what the minimum requirement for education is, I don't really know. I have not researched that to know. The other,
like something would be like, let's say a kid is sexually abused. Do you think they would tell them, like, okay, well, if it's a sexual abuse case, don't take those cases involving incest or sexual battery because otherwise we're going to have to deal with criminal courts and people don't want these kids. Do they ever say things like that?
I never heard anything like that said. Now, there is another part to the education or their rules, whatever they go by. There are, at the time I was there, in the state I was in, there was 3-ring binders, and probably, maybe, 8, 10 of them. And one of the jobs I did was update those notebooks. And that was done on, at least a weekly basis. There were new inserts. I'd have to pull the old, stick the new in. Now, those sat in my office. Rarely did caseworkers come in to verify what the requirements were, what the guidelines were. There were some. There was a few that would come in and try to figure out situations, but it was very rarely. And it was constantly changing. So I have no idea how they kept up with it, other than they didn't, and they just did whatever they wanted. Okay.
So actually it was just based on their prerogative, even if they didn't have the training and expertise necessary to determine if a child was being abused or not.
Right. Now, there's another part to this that I was not familiar with, and there would be caseworker meetings, with the supervisors and caseworkers. I was not involved in those, so I don't know what went on behind those closed doors. All I know is what I had in front of me and what I heard. Now, one incident, I was in talking with a supervisor. A caseworker walked in asking that supervisor for taxi funds for a father who had custody of his children that he was sexually abusing. Now, they have requirements, and these requirements are totally ridiculous. They are set up for you to fail. But they have the requirements, the hoops you have to jump through, when you get caught up in this system. Well, this father lived out of town, did not have a vehicle, but had to get to these meetings. So this caseworker was wanting to provide funds for taxi service to make sure this man got to his meetings, because she wanted to make sure that he would jump through all the hoops so they could keep those children in his home, because she said, quote unquote, these children are not placeable. We have to keep them with this father.
Oh, wow, that's terrible.
I was speechless. I'm just going, holy crap! So
I'm going to ask you another question. Talking about that, did you learn anything about what they were doing to the moms? How they were taking the children away from the moms that were protective, that, where the children had been sexually abused? And they would take them to the doctor, the police, report to the police, and the next thing they knew, the children were being taken away from them, and they would end up being with the father where the incest was happening in the home.
And You know, I have a very dear friend of mine who actually ended up moving from the state she was in. Now, I was not involved in her case. I met her afterwards, and I kind of knew the paper trail. She was a foreigner. She was like a mail-order bride to an older, wealthy man, and she had 2 little girls. Well, she walked in on him sexually molesting these 2 very little girls. She did not understand our system. She thought if she could get a divorce, the girls would be safe. Of course, that doesn't work. And the state she was in took custody of those 2 little girls. She ended up now, by the grace of God, I think that a caseworker helped her kidnap her own children because they were terminating her parental rights, and they were going to put those 2 little girls in the custody of the father. But a caseworker basically helped her kidnap her own children during a visit.
Having no choice, right? I mean, let me tell you, there must be some pretty brave social workers out there that they see and their hands are tied, and they have to do the unthinkable as well as on either end, you know.
Right. She basically, you know, looked the other way, was distracted, whatever, while that mother left the playground during a visit, the park, I guess it was, during a visit, and had somebody close at hand to get her out of there. And she had to walk away from her brand new... What's that?
I hope and pray that they are all right.
They are. They're actually grown now. One is married, and I still have contact with them. I'm like a second mom to those girls because the mother did raise them on her own. The father did end up dying, and
good.
But you know, she had to leave. Brand new home she had built, her car, her everything, and just take what she could carry with her and her girls. So I know that sort of thing happens. I did not
over every single day.
And see, that's what I hear. I have heard lots of stories like that. I did not actually, witness that kind of paperwork going through the office. Now, what I did witness.
Did you ever hear anything from a caseworker or anyone that dealt with anything of that sort?
No, not through the agency that I worked with. Okay, and one of the things you have to realize too is that even, being in the same building with all these people that are supposed to be working together for our families and our children, but they are so segregated. I mean, everybody, and it's just very rarely did you actually, pick up on conversation or, get the information. I know one incident where I had the branch manager bring me referrals and told me to close them. Normally those referrals have a process to go through and end up in baskets and out baskets and la-di-da, whatever. But she hand-delivered these to me and said, Debbie, you need to close these. I said, I got, there was like 6 of them, 7 of them, and what it was a situation that was happening in a foster home, okay?
All right.
That foster home, the foster father was being inappropriate with the little girls in the home. And, I had to go through this paperwork and close this stuff out. And what had happened was the boys in the home were telling the things that they seen him do with the little girls. Now, he wasn't bothering the boys, but it was the little girls in the home. The foster mother actually came into the agency and requested that their home be closed due to what her husband was doing. Okay, I had all the documentation sitting here in front of me. Nobody talked to me about this. Now, the caseworker supervisor, whomever it was that spoke with the foster mom, convinced her to remain open. After that, all they put in was little girls under the age of 3 years old, because under 3's testimony is not admissible in court. Okay, are you catching on to what I'm saying there, that this agency set up to happen in a foster home? They want foster homes to abuse children, and sexually is much easier.
So they on purpose put them in homes where they know that they're sexual abusers.
So what you're saying is they want them to purposely sexually abuse the children so that they could, put services in the home, or make them a special needs child, or?
To justify their actions, I think, because when they would pull children out of homes, they have to have a reason that they took them, right?
Exactly.
So if they could create that. Now, here's the other part to that, is that they have their state-paid psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever they're working with. Those professional people, quote unquote, they have them hired, and they will state when a child does come forward and say that they have been sexually abused. And now there's all kinds of conditioning and everything, prodding and everything. It can go over, weeks and weeks, months, whatever it takes to get this child to finally admit to this. Most of the time, that child, now I don't know the percentage of this or anything, but what I've seen was when the child did say someone molested them and they pointed the finger at a foster parent, then that professional would state that the child was portraying the abuse from their biological parent onto their foster parent because it's safer for the child.
You mean, in other words, they would blame the biological father of the abuse when it was actually the foster father that was doing it?
Yes, and they would have the credentials behind them to state that this is true. Another thing you have to realize is that whatever goes into a case file is the truth, okay? That becomes fact, no matter what it is.
That's their truth. It's not the truth. It's their truth.
It's not the truth, but it is what becomes basically etched in stone, and for them, that is what is real. And so even with the courts, with everything else, whatever goes into that case file, there is no questioning it. And so caseworkers put in whatever they want. They even have ways of wording things to make, one parent look worse than the other when both parents may be doing the same thing. They'll say, something like, well, this one parent, I don't know, example may be a drug abuser versus an addict. Okay, they know how to use this wording so they can almost put the blame onto one. And a lot of times they put most of the blame onto the mothers and kind of gloss over the fathers.
Do you know why they're doing this?
Well, I know that it's an agency that just feeds on itself. It wants to, I just seen it wanted to just be bigger and bigger and more powerful. And so they have created generational clutter, you might say. So, and one of the processes is to place a child in a foster home and then move them so there's no bonding time. I'm sure you're aware of we're human beings, animals, and that we bond. We need to bond. Well, that bonding process can be broken at a very young age, and all through with children. So they don't give them time to bond with any foster parents, families, or anything, and they just break that. And so then when the child becomes grown and have their own children, they don't have that bonding process. So it's really easy for that to end up being, neglectful or whatever, and it just creates this vicious cycle generation after generation.
Do you know if they mark the families, like, internally? Do they have, like, an internal structure? Like, let's say I took Betty's kids away, and now when Betty's kids grow up, they have, like, a target. I had seen on a document, on a school document, where it'll say DCF on it. And when I asked what that was about, they were like, well, that meant that family was in the system. It's like alerting the schools, hey, this child was in the system, and if they misbehave or anything, we're going to report them to the system again.
Yeah, and there's this whole process that's happening, I know, in this particular state. I'm sure it's probably nationwide. I hate to think that, but from, the time a child is born, there's an evaluation done. Is the mother single? What's the age of the mother? What's their income? All these things that they check mark against you. Okay, so if you have, a young 19-year-old single mom that has only worked a minimum wage job, well, she's pretty much red flagged as, potential to be able to take her children from her.
Exactly. Especially perhaps people that receive public assistance, huh? They're so trackable if you're getting public assistance because they know where you're at all the time. If you get food stamps, I'm sure that they can track you really easily. They were just saying the other day on TV, 47 million people are on food stamps. And they're saying it's breaking our budget, but
if we
there's
didn't
no
have
job.
Food stamps, we'd probably have a whole revolt. So, and that's a whole other topic, but you are right.
Exactly. But we're talking about, like, the tracking. Yeah. Can you be tracked by the services, and they'll always know where you're at.
And exactly. Now, when a referral comes in, you have the front receptionist office, whatever, they take the calls in, they take down the information. That goes into an inbox where a support person, it actually goes to an intake worker. The intake worker looks over and decides whether they want to not follow through, follow up on this, want to close it, and I don't know what those criteria are, or if they want to pursue this more. If they pursue it more, it goes into a different box that support staff picks up, and then the support staff pulls the hard copy file, if there is one, and check that off, that here's the hard copy file. They go onto the computerized system, the statewide system. They can pull up their current address, their current services, state services they're getting, and, any past history. So we know if they're on unemployment, we know if they're receiving Social Security, if they're receiving any welfare benefits at all. That's all printed up, pulled up, printed up, and attached to it. Okay, so why do they need to know what their income source is? Well, if they're low income, they are a big target for intervention, for coming in and, it's almost like they think that they're just products to produce children for the state to gobble up. Now, there's another part to, the agency creating these generational things. This part is a really big pill to swallow. But I worked with other agencies, outside agencies that would come in and do audits. And they would require certain files. They would give a list of the names of files that they wanted to see. Sometimes it would just be, I want to see all the D files, or they would have specific names. And then they would spend time, days, going through these files and kind of auditing the agency. And I don't really know specifically what they were looking for. But we went through these a lot. Well, one particular person that had come in to do an audit, I ended up kind of working with them. They're usually pretty private. But we got to chatting at one point, and he did mention children getting lost. These are foster children, children within the state, getting lost to satanic worshiping rituals. I also know from personal experience that children are also used for pornography. There has been caseworkers, lawyers, judges,
or
whatever.
pornography?
Pornography.
Pornography.
Child pornography. Yeah. And there have been those charged and found guilty by a jury trial of using foster children in pornography, for pornography purposes.
You mean caseworkers or people that work for the government? I mean,
Yeah.
they don't work for the government. They work for themselves. And that's something else, too, we want to add on down the line to get into is the fact that we spoke about this. They're not a government agency.
So yes, and there has been cases where they have been tried, found guilty by a jury trial, but then never prosecuted. So children, I know in this particular state, are being used in making movies for child pornography, and it's these foster children.
Oh, my God.
So there is money made everywhere. You have, I know of one caseworker that was an attorney and had been a caseworker for 15 years. That person could have made a lot more money as an attorney than as a caseworker. But there was kind of some hanky-panky sound going on. What's that?
Why do you think he was working as a caseworker then?
Well, I see it as black market. This was a person who was high up with attorneys, with judges, with the police force. I think they were just after children and getting kickback money. I don't have that documented. I didn't see that going on, but there was enough clues and enough details. That person even changed their name because they were ordered not to take their cases before a certain judge anymore. But you change the name and the problem goes away. And that's another is that a lot of the caseworkers do work under an alias name.
Wow. You mean when the caseworkers go before the judge, they use an alias?
Well, while they're working. As a working entity, yeah, they have an alias name. A lot of times they'll keep their first name, their first legal name, and then just use some random alias last name.
Why would that be necessary if they weren't stealing these children? I mean, when we had our conversation, I remember something about they have a school where they teach the caseworkers how to write up. Even the judges tell them how to write up their cases.
Okay, and that doesn't surprise me.
I know, but I thought
I've
we
seen
had a
enough.
conversation pertaining to the judges telling the caseworkers how to write up their cases.
I don't think that was me.
Okay.
But I did touch on earlier that there are different ways things are worded, and they are deliberately worded certain ways in case files. Things are exaggerated. Things are blatantly lied about. And like I said, once it gets in that case file, you play heck trying to change that, even if you can get access to your case file. An interesting tidbit still about the agency, but a little history. In this particular state, the agency was set up originally to help families. Okay, now I ended up in a project that I had to go back and do a lot of archiving of old files, and a lot of these case files I was having to read through to decipher which, where they needed to be categorized. And so I just found it really interesting. In the really old case, the referral would have, like housekeeping, child care, I can't remember the different categories, but, they have different categories that get checked. Well, protective services fell under other. So there'd be an other line, and if that was checked, then they would have to hand write in protective services. Okay, because the agency originally set up where, say, a mother had surgery and didn't have any outside help, a caseworker could come in, cook meals, clean house, tend to these children, transport the children to school, whatever needs were needed temporarily to help this family get through. That's what it was originally set up to do in this particular state. Okay, now protective services is at the top of the list, and 98% of them, that's what it's checkmarked. You certainly aren't going to have caseworkers go in and wash anybody's dishes anymore. It just, they just didn't have it. And so that was a real eye-opener for me on how that monster evolved. So the original agency was actually there to help families,
right?
Which it doesn't anymore. It's just tearing them apart.
Until someone discovered a way to do it easier and just take the people's children and sell them off.
Well, there's a lot more money to be made that way.
How much do you think they make per child that is adopted? They say it's $3,000 and $5,000 under Title IV. How much do you believe it would be?
I have heard rumors that it's more like $100,000 per child.
Big difference.
Wow.
Yeah. Now the other part is in this particular state, at the time that I was working for them, I used to know these percentages. Don't quote me on this, but it was like a very, very high percentage of the children that were being adopted out, like 70% of them, 80%, I can't quite remember what that number was going to homosexual homes. Okay, when our state population of homosexuals is 3%, why are all these children being sold into homosexual homes?
What about pedophile homes?
I don't know.
See, that's more what I think it would be more apt to do, unless they use that terminology, to give them a way of knowing where the children were placed. Now, I've heard a lot of information about how they were being given and sold into pedophile cults.
Well, I actually know of one situation. I was really close to this person who was female, and she was a dyke. She was abusive to her women. She was a drug user. Not a whole lot into alcohol stuff, but I grew up with this person. Well, she ended up in the process of adopting her sister's baby because her sister was in prison. So she was going to adopt this child. Well, that child had spiral break, leg, one incident, a broken arm, another incident at 18 months old. The Child Protective Service Agency continued to work with her, with everyone fighting them something terribly to get that child away from her. She was in 3 different drug rehab programs within the year and dropped out of everyone. She had moved 10 times or something. She just had no stability. And the agency
now this
continued.
Was a homosexual, right?
Yes, and they continued to work until everybody who knew were just having a screaming fit. And it actually went public, and at that point, they ended up letting the grandparents adopt that boy. But they were trying to push it through no matter what it took. and here you have a homosexual who's homeless, who's a drug addict, and who is abusive. And for a year, they fought like crazy to try to keep that child
Was that
with
child
this
being sexually abused?
No, physically, though. But that's another thing. So anytime I've had people saying, well, what's the best way to adopt a child from the state? And I always say, tell them you're homosexual. You'll get put at the top of the list.
Well, that is a case in point where the woman was mentally ill. She wasn't just a lesbian. She was mentally ill.
Right.
I mean, you know, not all of them are mentally ill. This woman was mentally ill. And they kept letting her stay there, the child stay there. It's a miracle that the child lived. But
that's the thing. That was the criteria.
They go into good homes where there's good parents, and they haven't hurt their children. There might be a neighbor that didn't like the way that, let's say they just didn't like their next-door neighbor. So all they have to do is make this anonymous, quote, phone call to CPS, and they'll come and take the children away. And they make a lot of money off that child. When they walk through the door, they know they're going to take the child. They know that they're going to get that child. Whether there's anything wrong or not, they're going to take the child. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know, really what the criteria was, other than what always came back was the child was adoptable.
That's what they put on the record, though.
I don't know that it was
Unless
actually...
they've been sexually abused. In that case, what did they put on there?
Well, in that case, they usually really wanted to work with the abusers to keep the children in the home.
With the abuser? Okay.
With the abuser.
Not with the good parent or the protective parent, but with the abuser. That's why all the abusers are getting the children. How do they? Are they still in the? When they give the child to the abuser, do they still stay in the picture?
The agency?
Yeah.
Well, if that person can jump through all the hoops and complete everything, the cases get closed. Now, there is retention dates, okay? And so those records do get closed, but if there's another issue that comes up, then it's opened back up again. So you'd see, one that maybe just had one issue and would go years with no problems. I don't really know what the history was. I don't know, because they don't put in the record, yes, this child is adoptable, let's go kidnap it, it's very subtle.
Right.
But then there are the files.
That's why I was wondering
that
class to teach.
There's files. Sorry, go ahead.
That's why I was wondering if there were classes to teach the caseworkers what to put down on the papers when they went, what wording to use on the paper.
The only thing I know was that the caseworkers that were most in question were the ones that had the largest caseloads, that had the most recognition, had their pictures posted on the branch manager's door. They're the ones who got all the recognition. The agency I worked for, I can't quite remember how many caseworkers there actually was, but say if there was 20, you had 5 to 7 that got top ratings and got the kudos and got all this recognition. Those were the ones that scared me the worst.
Do you think they were getting paid under the table?
I never seen any signs of that. Any documentation of that.
Okay, but you can tell. I mean, they'd be driving big cars. They would be living in nice homes, wearing designer clothes or name.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Expensive brand name clothes.
Oh yeah, they definitely. looked like they were well cared for. The caseworkers that actually wanted to make a difference and do right, they were the ones that would be totally stressed out, no recognition, the mouse over in the corner, because one of the things was is they weren't part of that wheel, and so they didn't get the support and the kudos and everything that those chosen few workers did. So you have to know that caseworkers are all different. Okay, there's different categories of them. There's the ones that got into the field because they really think they can make a difference, and they're the ones that are the most disillusioned when they get in there and they're wanting to do a good job. Then you have the ones that, kind of realize, maybe went into it for that, but realize that, it just doesn't work like that, and so they just go through the motions. Then you've got the ones that must be getting kickback somehow and that are really thriving on how that monster works. They're really into feeding it and really into getting the kickbacks from it. And what those are, I don't really know. But I definitely seen differences in your workers. And one of the things that they do is when there was any kind of questionable abuse in a foster home, and those referrals would come in and there would actually be, hard copy documentation of that, well, their solution is to move the child out of that home and that issue is resolved. Now, there's a term that they used, and I can't remember right off the top of my head what that was, but that's what they do, is remove the children if there's an issue, and so then feel that case closed because the issue isn't there anymore. Even though it may be abuse coming from a foster parent onto a child, which most likely it always was, they would just move the child that was squawking about it. And then that referral against that foster home goes into the child's case file and not into the foster home case file. Okay?
I have a good question for you. I want to ask you this question. Maybe you have the answer. I say it every time I'm online. I want to know if you have the answer. Why are the cases in the name of the children and not the parents? If the parents are the ones being alleged abuse, they're the ones who are being alleged a crime, not the child. And the case always, we can't find other men and women who have this problem because we don't know who they are, because all of the cases are in the children's name and not the parent's name. See, they say it's to protect the child. But if you were protecting a child, why would you open a case to begin with in the child's name and instead of the parent's name? See, if you open a case in the parent's name, you're not going to know automatically off the bat which child it was or their names or anything like that. But they say, we seal this file to protect the child, but it's the parents that are being accused of the crime and not the children.
Yeah, well, what I know that happens in this state, and there has been, people in general, organizations, whatever, I don't know the powers to be, that have been trying to get law passed where the agency has to come up with a crime that the parent committed. So then the police come in and arrest the parent for the crime that caused the children to be removed from the home. Okay, so then, because now they can go into your home and remove your children and nobody is charged with the crime. They make allegations, they make reports, all this stuff. And see, the agency is fighting against this process because then that would give the parent their day in court with a jury trial because they were charged with a crime.
Exactly.
So this is one of the things that all states need to look at and all states need to get set up, is that if children are being removed from a parent, the parent needs to be charged with a crime.
I think that they don't do it is because you can't charge somebody with a crime. Like if you go into someone's home and you're saying, oh, God, you don't have no food in the fridge, or someone's gotten out of work and you come in, the worker comes in, there's dirty laundry, dishes aren't done, that's not a crime. That's just untidy housekeeping for whatever reason. The mom could be at work. Now, if you were to come in and the place is littered everywhere with feces, I mean, I've seen it all, and dirty, filthy, then you can probably charge them probably with some kind of a first, second, or third degree misdemeanor crime for neglect. But I noticed that each time they don't use cameras to prove that the house is dirty. They don't use any type of video recordings. They don't want you to record them when they come in to your home. If you, like, at one point, I recall a worker stopping in and they'll say, I want to speak to your child, and I'll pull out a recorder, and they're like, no, 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 you cannot record. And I said, oh, yes, I can. I need to know why you're here, or they don't want you to record them. They don't want you to record your house so that when they come over, you could show your house was kept or whatever. So why are you here? Because the majority of the times when they're coming in, it's to look for. I've seen it's like a 70 to 80% of the cases being neglect, and if that's the case, they don't want it recorded. They don't want the conversations recorded that you have with the workers. And no one's charged with the crime, yet I tell these parents, you're being punished with a punishment that something is taken from you, yet you're never charged with a crime, and your name is put on this list. Your case is open for 99 years, your rights are terminated, but you've never been charged with a crime, and you've had your rights terminated. Your human parental rights, and they'll say it's because, and leaving your case open for an entire year, they're building a case against you. They don't even have a case against you, yet they leave your case open for a whole year. They put you through the case plan so you could fail it, so they can say, you know what, you couldn't follow our case plan, so, you're an unfit parent, and this is like a really, really big game for them. I don't know who taught them, but whatever the system mechanism is that's teaching these social workers, it's a diabolical. It is a mechanism to destroy and rip apart families, putting them in pedophile homes or any home where they have this category where the children should be hurt so they can get the special needs money. I mean, this has to be all a system devised by somebody pretty diabolical in the psychological field. Yeah.
And, you have to follow the money. And that's what I always say is follow the money. This agency has gotten bigger and bigger. It's consuming more and more and requiring more. And, so it's the same thing I was saying. It's creating its clients. It's guaranteeing its future. And I don't know how to stop that. Other than if people had to actually be charged for a crime and the documentation be done, like you say, video recording, pictures, all of this stuff done as evidence, then they wouldn't be able to just walk in to a family court, illegal court, that and just because they wrote it down in the case file, it's now fact. I mean, the caseworker walks in, oh, yeah, I went into the home, I took the children because of neglect. Oh, the parents neglected. Well, they don't have to have any evidence of that. They just have to say it. Okay.
So exactly. There's a 613 number online.
Okay. I wanted to also ask, do you know anything about the judges?
Not a whole lot.
I just know one thing I read up recently. I found some kind of a code where says that the judges are not allowed to interfere with the department's decisions. So I'm like, why are these judges sitting here then on the bench if they're not allowed to interfere or intervene? And I've heard a judge say it from her own mouth, but let me see. You said 613?
I think that was it.
Or 316?
Oh, 613.
No, I don't have a 613.
Okay.
But I do have a 724 that's on hold. Maybe they have a question.
Okay.
Let me see. Let's see. 724, you're on the air live with the Abuse Freedom Live show. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I do. You had said just about a minute ago that there is a code to the judges that they are to go along with the CPS report.
They're not allowed to intervene at all.
That they're not allowed to.
tell.
So, in other words, they can go through a court hearing that takes 2 years, and they're going to give the same decision that the caseworker gave, correct?
Exactly. So what I understand from this, because I asked for an interpretation from an attorney that's a public defender who told me never to say it was her, that what that means is that this agency was given the overall power over the children, and the judges are only allowed to oversee the administration. That means that when you're going to court and you think that the judge is sitting there being impartial, that he or she is only there to ensure that the agency is following proper policy and procedure over the entire case and not abusing that child's rights. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with the decisions that are being made on your child. It has nothing to do with, they do look at the case plan, though, like, say, they put like 1,000 things. They only want to make sure that that agency comes in and says, guess what, so-and-so did what they were supposed to do on the case plan, or they didn't. They can lie or do whatever they want to. The judge cannot overrule what they want.
I got on the line at 8:30. I didn't hear who you are.
April is her name.
Hi, April. And are you a former CPS caseworker? What is
No, I was only support staff.
Okay. Yeah. And so what you're saying is if these judges are doing that and they are basically playing out it's just a game, really, because the decision's already made. And then you said, another woman who was speaking earlier, you said that a case will be closed, and as long as the person who was accused of doing the abuse jumps through all the proper hoops, the case will be closed. But then you started to say something about there's something else that opens up or can open up.
Well, those records are then kept, of course, and if another referral comes in, then, that case file's all reopened again.
Okay. And so if somebody is, let's say that there is a father who was accused of neglecting and being inappropriate, borderline sexually inappropriate with a child, and caught doing it. And the caseworker, so this case was opened, and then the caseworker initially goes along with the mother who's accused the father of doing this, and then changes her tune very quickly and writes a completely different report that favors the father suddenly. If that case were to be reopened, what might happen? We're talking about hardcore evidence. I'm talking nanny cam footage, catching the father seriously neglecting and being inappropriate with a child, and it being held and kept out of court by the judge, would not look at it, refused to look at it, refused to adhere to doctor's letters saying, oh my God, I looked at this, this is terrible, and total refusal. What if that case was brought up again? What if that were brought out more, and it had been?
Well,
please.
Okay, that kind of evidence. Occasionally there are photos that'll be in the case file. If there is, audio or video. Now, I'm only speaking about when I was there, and this has been a long time ago. But those were supposed to be.
They were supposed to what? I'm sorry, the phone broke up. Those are supposed to be what?
Kept and documented in the file. One of the things, though, you have to remember is that if a legal party, the person, like the parent, whatever, comes in to request to see the records, well, I think you have you have to submit your application. It's 3 days for them to prepare those records for you. And they cross out whatever information they don't want you to have.
Yes.
And so it may not show that documentation is available.
So what do they do with a parent like this? I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you say something? Did you want to say something else on it?
Well, it's a tough call, and I wasn't there making those decisions, or I wasn't there having people tell me why they were making those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
The only consistency was following the money. These children, then, if they were placeable, if they were easy to be kept in foster care. Now, one of the things, they always want the kids to be special needs. So you would think that they would go after these children that are really genuinely abused and neglected and all this, so they could have them special needs. But they can create the special needs. Okay.
What if it is
when they get them?
Please.
Well, special needs, when I was there, and I'm just going to throw out numbers. Say a foster parent would get, say $400 for a normal foster child. Well, if the child was on, medication, well, that might bump up to $650 per child. Or if the child had to do, extensive counseling and medication, maybe autistic, something like that, well, it could jump up as high as, $1,200. Now, I'm just throwing out numbers so you can see the comparison.
I do. What I'm talking about is if, say, there was a mother who accused the father of neglecting and abusing the child, and the father ended up getting custody. Then,
why that is happening? I don't know. I don't, unless they're looking at future generational things, so they go, oh, well, this child's going to produce children, and they're going to be so screwed up that we're going to get their children. You see this generational thing happening.
What kind of hoops were you talking about that the abusive parent would have to jump through? What type of hoops? What is the? Oh,
would be, the different classes, the different things. Usually, and it's not always just, well, I guess you'd have to say the abusive child, because the parents that had their children taken away from, justifiable or not, all have to go through the hoops. And it was usually set up to where it was every day. You had a different class, you had a different place to be, then you had your visits and and it was just set up in such an intense schedule, and if you missed one, it's a check mark against you. So they set it up to where, well, I always say they're set up for failure, because there was just such
now,
heavy
are you thinking about the fathers that have been abusive or sexually abusive to their children?
I'm just referring to the parents that lose their children. I'm not giving a reason. I'm just saying whether they had just cause or not, there was the hoop. So going back to that man that had 3 children in his home and didn't have transportation, well, they have these hoops that are required. So for him, they were going to provide transportation to go get him and make sure he got to his classes and jumped through his hoops and was able to get to his visits. I mean, this is like on a daily basis. So they were going to make sure that he would not fail because they didn't want his children. They were not placeable.
So they would, and they also probably made extra money from all of the services that they were putting for him, probably through some other type of grant or programs, kickbacks. But it seems like every time they base their decision, it's based on who or how they're going to get paid.
Right. Well, and if they rack up, all this stuff that they have to do and provide and all this money that it costs, well, their budget just gets bigger and bigger. Okay?
Exactly,
and most likely the ones running it, oh, well, this is just such a big problem. We need more money. Their salaries get bigger and, it just grows. And it's all about the money. So,
of course.
Right. Well, that's how the agency grows, but it's terrible because, I was going to ask you, in these cases, have you ever seen a pattern where each year the amount of children that come into the DCF portal increasing a little bit every year? Have you ever seen a decrease?
Never a decrease. And constant complaining that caseworkers' caseloads are too large. Okay, they just have too much caseload. They're just overworked. It's overwhelming. And so they're constantly, well, I think it's a typical government thing, but they constantly, are just complaining. So then more and more taxpayers' money will go in to the agency. And reality, when you look at their case file, any of us could probably look at them and realize, well, they don't need services. They don't. What are you doing? Give those people back their kids. You could probably close out half of them, and our society would function probably much better than it is now.
Exactly. But I thought that was so important that you brought up how every family gets that case plan, and the second part is that those hoops. You can walk into a courtroom and ask them, are you kidding me? Are you just joking? I have never seen a case plan that required you to be at 3 different types of therapy in the same day.
Oh, yeah.
I had one client that went to one therapy. Then they expected for that person to catch a bus and go to the next one, which was one was a one-on-one, the other one was a family, and then the third one was some type of observational therapy. And they would write a report later saying that child fell, bumped their head, and the client would respond, there is no baby crib or anything in that placement where they go to meet the child. So if the child's falling down, perhaps it's because you have the inappropriate setting to even have a visitation with a child. And it was just a constant barrage of writing up that family member over such, I have heard some stupid things. But when the agency is setting up that family, you could smell a rat a mile away. There were days that I could stand in a courtroom and literally, I've listened to people in there, and they'd tell the judge, you are stupid, and I know you're setting me up, and they would just walk out that courtroom. The judge would pretend. I've seen the looks on these judges' faces where they are not surprised. They have this smirk on their face, like, I know that this is the way it is because I'm going along with it. I just see it in their face. This is like a joke for these families. The joke is not a joke because their children are being destroyed, but they are in shock when they see that this is actually going on in our courtrooms.
Right. And people don't realize it until they're caught in it. And it's usually when they get really deep that then they start looking for outside help. And it's hardest to get them out. Somehow, this needs to be educated to the general public so they're aware of what they're up against and realize that caseworkers lie. They will tell you whatever they want you to hear to get their way. So an example was a young mother who had had a couple of her children taken away. She was pregnant. She was going to do an in-home birth, but the caseworker informed, oh no, we'll go ahead and release the baby to your mother. Okay? So they had all the documentation. They had documentation in hand. So they went to the hospital, had that baby. They did a lockdown and took that baby away from her as soon as it was cleaned up. And she was never to see her child again. And they're going, we have it in our hands. I mean, police were there in the delivery room ready to walk out with this baby. And so you cannot believe anything the caseworker says. Now, I do have to say, there are those caseworkers who are truthful, that really, really do want to make a difference, but they're fighting against the monster they're working for. And so a lot of times their hands are tied, because they have the supervisors, the whole department heads, the branch managers, they have all of that above them. But it does start with the caseworker, I think. Once that referral is called in, I always tell people, never call Child Protective Services unless you think that child's life is in danger. Because you can call the police, and when you say child in danger, they say, you've got to call Child Protective. They wash their hands of it. They don't have any control. The CPS they're above the law, okay? And they're not going by laws. They're just going by procedures and policies and falsified courts. So, back to when I first started there and in orientation in these caseworkers going, but please give us our guidelines. How do we decipher from one case to another? And it's like, hey, it's your own judgment. And so the caseworkers that have been in there the longest and the most successful are the ones you want to watch out for.
Excuse me, I wanted to ask you a question. When they call children special needs, if they don't have a special need, when they take the children from the parents, they start drugging them.
Yes.
And they do this why?
For the money.
They
want to build a case. They want to build cases for these children to justify their actions. Okay, so that's they like homes that molest the children, because then now they have children that have been molested. They medicate them so that they can say, well, this child's on medication. They're building the case to justify their actions.
I know that.
And it justifies why they keep them for a whole year.
Yeah, to make sure the damage is done. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. They keep them for a whole year, and the law states, the code states you have 60 days. That person has a right to a speedy trial, and you'll bring that justified to the courts, and the judge looks at it and throws the paper to the side. I've seen these judges. I was telling Jane, and I did it on a previous show. I don't know if you've ever heard our shows before, but I sat there one day behind a curtain, and I was sitting in the courtroom, outside in the lobby, and this general magistrate was giving a huge meeting to all the public defenders, and she was literally lashing out at every one of them for every case that was overturned that the parent won on a court of appeals, telling them where they made their mistakes. And I'm saying, oh, my God, do I believe that this lady saw my face. And when she saw me, she literally choked because she knew she had to give that meeting, and I was sitting right behind that curtain. And she was just fidgeting because now I'm going to know their secret, which was you're even training these public defenders to purposely lose those cases. And what in the heck are you doing sitting there with public defenders who are, and you're supposed to be an impartial judge. These public defenders are supposed to be defending the parents, and you're sitting here giving them a meeting and cussing them out, calling them stupid, telling them that they let these cases get overturned and that the parents got their kids back. And I'm thinking, am I seeing and hearing this correctly? And I try to tell the parents, you are the only person in that courtroom standing by yourself. That not even the public defender is there for you. They are there to feed you to the wolves and basically hand your, they're going to go ahead and keep that case open for a whole year until they can gain their leverage and adopt your children off. But, I agree with you. We have to open some type of an agency where people have to know what is happening here.
Right.
And every agency now is ordered, including firefighters, police. If you call in a domestic violence,
reporters.
Yes, they're mandated reporters. They don't even take a domestic violence. I was told by the station here where we're located at, we're in the state of Florida, that if you get a domestic violence call or a mother goes into a safe house, a domestic violence shelter that is run by the state or with any type of government funding, they have to call the child abuse hotline. Every single call of domestic violence. And that means no woman is safe. No parent. Because if a man calls
you have to go back.
Still going to call.
You have to go back to, that situation where these caseworkers are getting a butt chewing because they lost their case, because they lost money. They're losing the money. That's state money.
What percentage
that comes in for all those
of parents
children
win cases? What's percentage of parents that actually get their children back?
Oh, Lordy. That's a good question. That would be a good research thing. Very, very slim. And it is a game. You had said game. There is definitely the game playing going on. The agency does not care about children, does not care about families. It only cares about numbers.
So what
so when
you're
it counts
saying,
up
in
the
order to
money's
do
up.
anything with this, we have to follow the money. We need to find out who's getting the money and why. I know pharmaceutical companies are making a lot of money from these foster children. Now, that much we do know.
What about the fact that, I think, Jane, did you tell me that you said CPS is really not a government agency?
Okay, let her answer that question.
Okay.
April?
Yes. I don't know about that. That's news to me because now I did deal with some of the budget, and I worked straight out of the head state government offices.
Okay, now I was thinking the other day you said that they were a corporation, not a government agency.
Well, this particular state is a corporate state. Okay. Now I don't know about every other state. You might want to, take a look and see. But ours is definitely corporate state of, and so meaning that they're a corporation, they're in it to make money.
Okay.
Oh, so that's something important to know. That's why they don't care, and I want to see, I'm going to bring in, let me see, I have here at 310, they might have a question here that you may or may not be able to answer, but let's see what we can do here. 310, you're on the air live with the Abuse Freedom Live show.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hi. I didn't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. I have a question. I'm out in California.
It doesn't make any difference where you're at.
My situation is a little bit different in that my son is being abused by his father, and I was forced on monitored visitation for reporting the abuse. And then when my son showed up with bruises in front of the monitor refused to report it. Next time there was a different monitor, and he said, hit me. The meantime, the other time he said his nanny hit him, and he's afraid of his nanny. He's hiding, defecating in his pants, all these signs of abuse, and can't make eye contact anymore, developed a learning disability, failed in kindergarten, blown up, like, I don't know if they've got him on medication or what, but, you know, my son was a sweet, sweet, innocent 5-year-old, and why his dad's beating him, other than he's a drug addict, I don't know, but his father is very wealthy, and the time when he had whelps, it was last year in April, the monitor told me to go to the police station and report it and take photographs, which we did, and my son told the police that his dad beat him. And the police officer says, oh, yeah, I was spanked as a kid. That's no big deal. The police officer didn't report it. So then my ex-husband stopped all visitation and dragged me to court by forcing him to go to the police station. I found out the police never reported it to DCFS. The next day I called Children's Services, and they opened an investigation on the father, and he got all his lawyers involved, and they wouldn't let him see my son until the bruises were gone that time. And then my son said that time his dad never hit him. Then his dad said he did hit him that day, but he's not going to do it anymore because now he talked to his lawyers, and he's not going to hit him, but he probably would test positive for drugs, but his lawyer told him he's not going to test. And next thing you know, I have a 5-year restraining order against me for reporting child abuse. My son still has no help. He's still living in the house where he's being beaten, abused, and probably molested because there was molestation signs before that when he was 3.5. And, you know, Children's Services...
Did he end up with a child?
Yes, he did, and the Children's Services says it was inconclusive. And I called up over there, and I said, listen. And before I had called many years ago, and they said, oh, you're making all these false reports. Well, they weren't false. This most recent one was inconclusive for physical abuse and neglect of the father. And you know, the guy's using drugs. He submits to Children's Services. My son told the police and a monitor and a mandated reporter that his dad's beating him. A parent at my son's school, my son told my dad's beating me. She told my son's school, and they said they couldn't do anything about it because it was during spring break and they don't have any jurisdiction. And my ex-husband and his attorneys are running circles, and my son's being abused, and now he's stuck in that house and he hasn't seen me for a year. So, you know, as far as what's going on, maybe it's too much money involved from the father that they won't take the kid from him. I mean, you know, from what you're telling me, they're taking kids left and right, and this is a different situation. So my son's being abused. His dad's sticking his hand inside his butthole. I mean, this is from other witnesses that have nothing to do with me. And my son's living there. And Children's Service knows all about it, and they haven't done anything about it.
Well, I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second, 3 times, so she can answer that question or give you a little bit of insight or what her opinion would be on that matter. And thank you for your call. Hold on 1 second. Okay, April.
Okay. And, you know, this is the craziness with the agency. I think she did touch on part of it. He is wealthy. He's got the finances to fight. So that could make it, you know, a little extra work for the agency to try to deal with. Having money eliminates one of those check marks against you, you know, that I was referring to, the list that they go through. So if you're in poverty, you know, that's a check mark against you. Well, that has been removed. And, you know, it really is part of the craziness, because I've seen children left in homes where the public was crying out, and the child dies in that home without any child protective services there.
Do you know if
Now,
they ever try to wipe out the children? Like, I had a case where a foster mom, a 10-year-old killed the 2-year-old, and she told me that they virtually erased both of the children from the face of the map, including the one that lived. I guess they had to give her a new identity, new name. But do they do these things?
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me a bit. I do know that they do count children that they don't have a clue where they're at. They've taken them into custody, and they lose them. There's no documentation of what happened to that child, but they continue to do a head count.
Wow, even though they're missing.
Yeah, even though they're missing. If they don't have anybody to be accountable for, if they've completely severed the parental ties and the parents haven't a clue even what state their children are in, and they just, they give up or, whatever happens, I know one person that didn't see his child for years, and finally, through a big enough squawk long enough that his child showed up on the other side of the country in a whole other state.
What about
but there are
the
a lot of
aliases
people out
that
there.
you said? You said they use aliases. Are they using like fake IDs or, like in our state, they were caught making fake credentials, fake college degrees, falsified birth certificates here for the state of Florida because these workers were being imported from other countries like Colombia and South America, and they didn't have a right to work here. They didn't even have work permits, so what they would do is create false identities for them and give them false birth certificates and credentials to be able to be social workers. I've even met some social workers that don't even speak English. And I'm like, well, how did you graduate from college if you don't even speak English? And let alone your English is very broken and improper, so I don't know how you got a job with the agency, and they'd stay really silent. Do they do that around? Do you think they're creating false identities for these people?
It's not anything that I have seen, but it doesn't surprise me none to hear that sort of thing. What I experienced was, I never seen a caseworker's ID, their actual ID, but there would be times that, Joe Blow is now going by, Joe Doe. And we were just like, oh, okay, change their name on their little inbox, and that was just the way it was. That was never questioned.
Do you know that if children ever just disappeared after the agency took them in, was there accounting for all the children, or did some children just kind of disappear into the wayside?
They do disappear. But the state still gets funding for them.
They never report that they've disappeared. They still just take the money.
Right.
Okay.
Unless somebody really makes a big stink about it, right? Like if somebody's persistent, that's when they reveal that the child is gone.
I remember seeing in one area of Los Angeles at one time, over 500 children just disappeared. Unaccounted for foster children.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Children there's money to be made. I mean, I barely touched on the whole pornography ring thing, but, I'm sure there's a bunch of weirdos out there that will pay a lot of money for really perverted films being made and whatnot. It's illegal, but, hey, I guess, it's always more expensive when it's illegal. And
so do you think that more of the children that have been sexually abused are sold into that area? They're sold the pedophile cults?
Yeah, I would have to think so. I mean, if the child is conditioned for that sort of behavior, then, they will participate better. I know one situation where a foster mother who was also a school teacher made a film of a foster child while they were dancing naked and masturbating, along with whatever else. I don't know. So that child has to be conditioned to know how to perform.
We know the really horrible, and I mean really horrific thing about it is more money is spent on child pornography in the United States than any donations to help the children.
The fact that she's also
spend the money on child pornography, but you don't get the donations in order to help us fight these issues. People don't want to donate to help us fight it. They give it to the large organizations. I mean, we have so many parents that are out in the street. They've lost everything because they have fought for their child that they know is being abused, that's in the system, that they can't even get in touch with any longer. They're just taken away from them. They don't even have a chance to fight them. They don't have the money to hire an attorney, so they usually take the attorneys that are furnished to them that are being paid by the same agencies that
paid by the state that they have to fight against. Yes,
that's
I know.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's
and what about
the psychologists? They're never going to win the children back.
No.
How about the satanic? Do you think you were saying something about the satanic cult?
Yes.
What is their involvement?
I don't know, other than I was just told a lot of the children, these foster children, disappear through satanic worshiping. And you have to understand
we had a guy on about a couple months ago. Remember Jane Douglas Dietrich?
Yes.
Where he says that a lot of these so-called judges were like military judges, and I don't want to quote him right now, but we don't even know if a lot of these judges are involved in a satanic cult, and they look like normal individuals, and they're taking these children and just putting them into satanic worship and using them for unspeakable things. But it's time that we have to stand our ground, and this is what it is. This is human trafficking in the United States. This is not a court proceeding. This is not a child protective services agency. This is a game for them. They are human trafficking children.
It's a corporation that's making billions of dollars off of our tax dollars to take the children from parents.
Right.
Do you remember when we really were getting an influx of children adopted out of Romania?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when that was going on? Okay. There was actually a state head of Child Protective Services that created the airport adoption, I think is what they called it. She went over there, taught them how to do these quick adoptions. They were actually flying children from Romania to here, and adoptive parents weren't getting their children. That is why Romania has shut their adoption down with the United States, because they were finding out their babies were coming to this country and
being used as sex objects.
Yeah.
What happens to those children then once they've been used by these pedophiles and these cults? If they survive that, what happens to them? They stay in the cult forever and they reproduce, and it's horrible things happen to children. I mean, babies in these cults. I know these.
Right. I mean, there's the sacrificial thing going on and all of that stuff too. Children who do grow up in the system and become adults are usually dysfunctional. They're usually into drugs. They're usually, reproducing children, they're very dysfunctional, and so then their children become wards of the state.
And it's a cycle.
Yeah, so it's just a cycle that continues. And
so in order to do you have any idea, in order to bring any of this down, how can it be done?
Well, the one thing I see that could make a big difference is if the states would pass laws that the parents have to be charged with a crime. Okay? So then their cases would be heard. There are many, many parents that never get to see a juvenile judge.
No, not at all.
They'll be lucky to get a case plan that is nearly impossible for them to complete. But that's the thing, is if they're charged with a crime, then they have a case. They get their day in court. But most parents are like, oh, no, you don't want to be charged with crimes. Well, yes, you do, because then you're going to get your day in court, and you're going to get a jury trial. You will be in amongst your peers. Okay, that's probably the number one thing that would make a really big difference.
Yeah, that's why they're not getting a trial right now. A lot of parents will come on to our show and they'll say, ma'am, you don't know what you're talking about. They won't even give us a trial. You know why you're not getting a trial? Because you've not committed a crime. They're stealing your children, people, and that is the bottom line. The judges are playing a game. Yeah, they're just taking them.
They're just taking the children.
I would take that little case plan and tell them where to shove it where the sun don't shine. And it even says on some of the documentation on codes and statutes that you're taking the case plan does not constitute an admission to committing the alleged allegation against you, but that if you don't want to do the case plan, then we can automatically come in and terminate your parental rights, but based on what? You can ask that question to a judge 1,000,000 times, and they'll look at you like you're stupid, and you'll say it again. Based on what are you taking my children away of? You haven't proven anything in this court of law because it's not a court of law.
Yes. It's not a court of law, so they don't have to follow law.
Exactly.
If they're not a governmental agency, if they're not a government agency, they're just a corporation that receives money, like any corporation that applies, and they have a good reason they can receive the monies, then why is it that we cannot do anything with them?
Because it's a huge monster. I don't know.
Exactly.
I just,
it's true what you're saying. It is a huge monster, and the only way that these families are going to be able to get out alive is running away with the children and having an underground railroad like we had a long time ago for the slaves.
Yeah.
We would have to create an underground railroad for moms and dads who are trying to get away from a monster to start a whole new life.
Well, we used to have one. We did have one that stretched from
what happened to it?
Coast to coast. A very, very wealthy man, multi-millionaire man, was an abuser, and his wife and children. This was just for sexually abused children that were not being protected by the states, and so they ended up in the underground. And he threatened the head of the organization, threatened her life and her family, and she had to shut it down to protect her family. But yeah, we used to have one that actually worked quite well. There was a lot of people involved. You had a lot of attorneys and doctors, and so these people could get medical care and, families, homes that would take them in, it was actually set up pretty well, but it no longer exists.
It's pretty sad. It's pretty sad. And they recognize the fact that these kids were abused. These doctors recognized that these children were being abused. And that's what happens in the end, is that you have a bunch of physicians, therapists, and psychologists sitting here with these courts and lying through their teeth. And I know many of you parents that have been through this, you would know this, that when your child, if you do get them back, you notice that your child has changed. They're not the same child when they come back home. They're dysfunctional. They're on so many pills when they come home, and you're thinking, oh, my God, I have a brand new child to work with. And that's another failure in itself, because you're getting, the child's getting home after months of being in foster care, and the child's on so many different medications. It's not even the same child. It's like they come home and they hate you. They think that you've abandoned them. They tell them so many lies about the parents. They don't even love their parents anymore when they get home. They've been through so much abuse.
Right. And there's also that situation I know of a family personally where they were divorced, but the adults had remarried. The mother ended up with custody of the children. The father, him and his new wife had a daughter. Well, he ended up able to get custody from the mother, from the other children. Actually, the new mom had a daughter, and then they had a daughter together. The first family, there was a daughter and a son. Well, he got custody of them. Well, that son was a young teenager at the time. He had been found guilty and of molesting his sister and a friend or something, a couple of little girls. But he had gone through, everything and legally. Well, so this father gets these two children in his home, and then he contacts the state. They were in a different state, and said, now, this is a situation I have. What happens if this boy ends up acting out on my daughters? And they said, we will come in and remove your daughters from the home. They will leave the boy there, but they will remove the daughters. He ended up having to send his son back to the state he came from because he couldn't take a chance on losing all of his daughters, the innocent ones.
Wow.
So, it's not like there would be, consequences for this boy's behavior, but the girls would be punished.
So they target 3 and under. The workers go based, you said the workers go based on their own knowledge or their own presumptions. And 3 and under is because of what reason again, that they target 3 and under?
3 and under's testimony isn't admissible in court.
Okay. That's for you families that are getting in, you didn't hear the beginning of the show and you're just getting here. Ms. April was giving out information on who, the age range that they target, which is 3 and under, why they target 3 and under. Basically, that the workers, there is a policy and procedure handbook that gets exchanged every week. She was taking out documentation and adding new ones almost every week when the policies would change. Workers rarely went to the books to even look at the policies. They went based on their own presumptions of what they would define abuse, how they saw abuse. If they felt it wasn't abusive, then it wasn't abusive. But,
they made up abuse.
Yeah.
I mean, they made up their own
made up the abuse. And
they were told what they could use as abuse, and it would give a reason. They could put it down. The parents couldn't prove that they hadn't done it.
No, and they have, their state-paid doctors that will state that the abuse came from the parent, no matter what the child says it came from.
Right,
okay.
Like you say,
so the
if it was the foster parent, the doctor will say it was really the biological. They're just using that to feel more comfortable. Too difficult for a child to admit their parents abused them. See,
Do we have
so even
any
if the
more
child
questions?
Okay. We still have 10 minutes here. Let me see if anyone else has a question or something that they want to say about their state, something that they know regarding CPS. Hold on one second here. Hold on one second. 316. Do you have a question or a comment for our guest tonight? 316?
Hello, 316. You're on the air live with Abuse Freedom. You have a question or comment for our guest tonight?
Oh, is that me?
Yes.
That's you.
Hi.
That's you, my dear. Hi.
I've been listening to all of this. I wondered if she feels that the federal government is aware of what all is going in the states, in the courts and everything.
That's a good question. And I don't have an answer for that.
If they're not a government agency, they don't have to report to them, do they?
Well, they do. I mean, they are going under the state government profile, and they are receiving federal funds. And you have to know, too, that anytime any kind of organization receives federal funds, be it, our public school system or any, government agencies, they don't just hand that money out for free.
Mm-hmm.
They have to jump through, they have to implement some sort of a program. What that is with Child Protective Services, I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to find out, because as you know, in our public school systems, if they receive federal money, then they have to implement some sort of a program, whether it be fluoridation for teeth or some, silly thing that doesn't pertain to education. So now with the Child Protective Services receiving money, federal money, there's got to be something that agency has to implement to receive that money, and I don't know what that is.
Well, see, they have to implement, they call it encompassing all of the federal requirements in order to receive the funds. I know that the governors, which are the top executive officers of each state, have to sign a certificate, and I think this last year they made it automatic. It was like every maybe 5 years, 4 or 5 years, they have to sign a certificate with the federal government stating that they would be willing to change their laws according to the government's requirements in order to receive those funds. So there are certain things that, what you were talking about, how the judge just sits there. He's making sure that they do everything. The child was legally removed, that there was an investigation. There has to be an investigation before that child is removed. They don't do that. There has to be a reasonable effort, services offered before that child is removed to maintain that family unit. They're not doing that. He's just like got a little checklist, and he's just end up rubber stamping, just like you said. Yeah. But law enforcement, when they take a child, I was just reading here a couple of months ago that the federal government states that that law enforcement officer cannot say the social worker told him to remove that child. He has to document probable cause, what he actually saw that made it an emergency to remove that child. Otherwise, the social worker has to get a court order to remove the child. But this is all, when they're not doing this, not only the way you're talking tonight, it's all child trafficking, of course, but they're not meeting the requirements of the federal government. The taxpayer is paying for all of this. Then these states should not be receiving the funds they're receiving from the federal government. Now, I listened one day, and it's out there on the Children and Families Committee, Senator Mikulski, and Washington, D.C., she's the chair, and they were concerned about the Sandusky case and how so many children are being sexually abused and not being reported. And I believe it was Blumberg or somebody. Anyway, he said maybe we need to remove the funding from the states if they don't protect these children. I'm wondering if they even know that the children...
Well, yeah.
How can they not know? How can they not know? It's all over the Internet. It's everywhere.
Well, Jane, I agree with you, absolutely. But, I mean, they're acting as if they don't know, or they're not aware that it's, they're paying out all this money, and these people are not even following the law here. I know they don't here in Kansas at all.
Right. Well, and that's what I said before. They are above the law.
Well, they're not supposed to.
They're not supposed to be.
No, because everything is based upon them following I've read that Social Security Act over and over and over. When the states receive funding, USC 42 USC 625, they are required to protect a child. They don't. They pick and choose what they're wanting. Who they're protecting. The pedophile always gets the child. It's almost as if they're growing a crop or something. I don't know, wanting more children to fail or grow, as adults have more income. I don't know.
Why are they giving the child to the pedophile? Explain that to me. Why are they taking away from the protective parent and giving it to the pedophile?
I wish I knew. Because
they're guaranteed clients.
What
generation? Oh, they're setting up for the next generation. So they make sure that,
growing a crop. Yes, growing a crop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know. But these are tax, they're talking about cutting budgets. Why don't they cut this?
My goodness. If they would do that, it would help save Medicaid,
but it's
Medicare.
But
it would help save Social Security. If they took all these foster children, stop them from taking all these children.
Mm-hmm.
Look how much money could be saved.
Yeah, but see, it's not the outcome. Any big business that did what these agencies do and have the poor results that they have would shut that part of the business down. The outcome is so poor. We have kids, articles in the, Wichita, Kansas, where the kids are on the street. They're kicked to the curb. They turn 18. They move them out of foster care. They're on drugs because they've drugged them tremendously.
That's why our streets are full of young kids.
Exactly. See?
Prostituting themselves, doing anything they could to survive, dealing drugs, you name it.
Do we have to get the taxpayer angry that they're paying 80% of the people incarcerated have come through the foster care? Is that what we're going to end up having to do, get the taxpayer angry?
If that's what it takes, then that's what we're going to have to do.
Well, that sounds good, but it seems like society as a whole, we've become very complacent.
We have.
And so, things that the U.S., the American people wouldn't have tolerated, 30, 40 years ago, everybody's like, oh, yeah, I know all about that. As long as it doesn't bother their little bubble, then they don't want to be bothered by it.
You said something earlier. You said if you're not more or less involved, if it hadn't happened to you, you don't know about it. It doesn't seem like, or something. You said something similar to that, and that's true. I'm amazed. Until you've been affected by these agencies and by CPS, you haven't a clue that this is happening. And most people, if you talk about children being abused or stolen, or they turn their heads. They don't want to hear it. It's painful for them. They don't want to hear that. So then you've got to find something to tell them that's going to upset them about something else, So,
for example, if you post a picture of a child that's been abused, post it on Facebook or send it out in an email, you get all kinds of remarks about, oh, I can't look at this. Please take this down. It's a fact.
But yes, we have these
our children. They've been
stolen.
Jane, we have 1 minute. Sold to pedophiles.
We have 1 minute remaining, Jane.
Oh, already?
Yeah,
already.
So fast.
Okay, well, I'm going to wrap up by saying I think that getting private party grant money somehow to start organizations somehow that would be out there to offer services to families, non-judgmental. If you've got a drug problem, if you need help, something in that aspects where there's help available to come into the homes and help families where they don't have the fear of the state coming in and ripping their families apart.
Well, the problem we've got here is that these families, and all these families have done anything wrong.
Well,
They've not
this
done
is true.
anything wrong. They just go in and they steal their children, and they're left sitting there wondering what they've done wrong. They can't even go into court and find out what they've done wrong.
Yeah. So they need to be charged with a crime. Every state needs to implement that law to have a crime committed and the parents be charged with the crime.
Right.
So then they get their day in court.
Exactly.
Exactly.
There's
I think
nothing
that's
worse
one
than
of the best
losing.
answers I've heard yet.
That's right.
Well, I want to thank everyone
It's
for being
stopping
on the
the
show today. It was a great show.
I could go for another hour on these.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you so
I
much
need to fix
for
dinner.
being on. And we thank everyone, all of our listeners tonight. God bless each and every one of you. And remember, we're here to help, but you have to learn to help too.
Exactly. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and thank you, April, for being on and bringing all this information forward.
Thank you.
And we hope to talk to you again.
It was a
God
good
bless each and every one of you.
And thank you, Marlene, for putting in input as
Yes,
well,
thank
because
you
you're very
so much.
knowledgeable.
Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, April.
Thank
It
you.
was a great
Well,
night.
everyone, have a good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you for being on.
Till
Bye-bye.
the next time.
Yes. Bye-bye.